What would you do if the person you trusted most, the one who promised to stand by you through thick and thin, destroyed the only connection you had left to your late mother? Think about that for a second. Imagine opening a locked box, the kind you keep hidden in the quietest part of your home, only to discover ashes where sacred words once lived. That is the picture painted by Whispers from Montecito, a story so raw, so shocking, that it has left the world gasping. At 54, Meghan Markle was reportedly caught destroying the private, handwritten letters of Princess Diana. And when Prince Harry found out, the fallout was volcanic. It begins, as all tragedies do, with something that should have been untouchable: Diana's letters. Not just scraps of paper, not just ink and lines, but living memories frozen in words. Words that Harry clung to during his darkest nights. Words he kept hidden from the world, protected like crown jewels, not because of their value in gold, but because of their value in love. He once said his mother's voice was the only thing that could still comfort him, even in death. These letters were that voice. Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. So the question must be asked, why would Meghan touch them? Why would she risk everything, knowing how sacred they were? Was it an act of anger? Was it jealousy? Or something even darker? That question is what makes this story so explosive, because no matter the answer, the act itself can only be seen as betrayal. Not just of Harry, but of Diana's memory. And that is why this story matters right now. The world has always compared Meghan to Diana, hasn't it? From the moment she stepped into the royal spotlight, the headlines screamed about a new people's princess. Meghan was meant to be Diana 2.0, a modernized echo of compassion and rebellion. But instead of admiration, that comparison quickly turned into chains. Diana was loved. Diana was untouchable. Diana was eternal. How do you live up to that? How do you compete with a ghost that still shines brighter than you? Maybe Meghan thought she couldn't. Maybe she thought Diana's shadow was swallowing her whole. Maybe, in a moment of desperation, she decided to erase that shadow once and for all. But in doing so, she lit a fire she could never put out. Picture the scene: Montecito. The sprawling home, manicured lawns, the kind of silence that only the wealthy can afford. And inside, chaos. Harry, pacing back and forth, fists clenched, face red. Witnesses say he was screaming, shouting about betrayal, shouting about his mother. Meghan, tears streaming, pleading, trying to explain, her voice breaking. And then the moment that will haunt them forever. Harry's words: cold, sharp, final. Get out. Right now. You're no longer part of this family. Do you feel the weight of that? This wasn't just a marital spat. This wasn't about arguments over money or schedules or the pressures of public life. This was about something deeper. A man's devotion to the only woman who never betrayed him, his mother, colliding with his wife's actions that could only be read as treason. And here's the irony. Meghan, who once told the world she had felt silenced in the royal family, now finds herself silenced in a different way. Not by the crown, not by palisades, but by the one man who had always defended her. Harry, the man who once went to war with his own brother and father to protect her, now standing against her with unshakable rage. But pause for a moment. Step back from the emotion. Because the question still lingers. Why? Why would Meghan risk everything? Theories abound. Some say she feared what was in those letters. Maybe Diana's words held warnings, truths that Meghan didn't want Harry or the world to know. Others say jealousy. That Meghan was tired of being compared to Diana and wanted to erase the reminder once and for all. Or maybe, just maybe, it was an act of passion, a fight gone too far, where destruction felt like control. Which of these do you believe? Because here's what makes this story so haunting. The destruction of those letters isn't just the destruction of paper. It's the destruction of trust. Once trust is burned, it cannot be taped back together. And for Harry, the loss wasn't just sentimental, it was spiritual. Those letters were his anchor. And without them, he was adrift. This is why the world is transfixed. Because we are not just watching a marriage in crisis. We are watching a man's last link to his mother ripped away before his eyes. And the person holding the match? His wife. The fallout was instant. Harry ordered her belongings packed, thrown out. Private security was told in no uncertain terms, Meghan is not to return. The gates of Montecito became her prison walls, shutting her out from the very home she thought she had claimed. Neighbors reported seeing her crying on the driveway, shouting into her phone, desperate. Paparazzi caught fragments, her face wet, her voice trembling. It was, in every sense, the undoing of the fairy tale. And yet, even in this chaos, one thing remains unanswered. What exactly was in those letters? What words did Diana leave her son that were so powerful, so dangerous, that Meghan felt they needed to be erased? Imagine if the letters spoke of Diana's fears about Harry's choices or her warnings about the dangers of marrying into fame. Imagine if they contained words that contradicted Meghan's narrative of being Diana's natural successor. Imagine the impact if the world ever saw them. That's the thread that keeps this story alive. The not knowing. The possibility that what Meghan destroyed wasn't just letters, but evidence. Evidence of truths too painful to face. And so here we stand. A family shattered. A marriage on the brink. A legacy desecrated. And a prince who has lost his mother all over again. The question now isn't whether Harry and Meghan can survive this. It's whether Harry will ever forgive her. Because betrayal cuts deep. And when it involves Diana, the cut may never heal. But here's the part you haven't heard yet. The detail that flips this story upside down. Harry didn't just find ashes. He found something else. Something Meghan didn't have time to destroy. And what he discovered lying half-hidden on the study floor changed everything. Some things in life are irreplaceable. You can rebuild houses, you can buy back jewels, you can even repair broken reputations. But there are certain treasures so intimate, so deeply woven into the fabric of memory, that once lost, they're gone forever. For Prince Harry, those treasures were his mother's letters. And now, according to whispers from those closest to the couple, those letters are gone, reduced to fragments of ash and torn paper, leaving behind only a hole in his heart. Let's begin here. Diana's handwriting. You know it instantly. Flowing, feminine, slightly tilted forward, as though her words were running to meet you. Each stroke felt like a whisper, a hug, a presence. For Harry, those letters weren't just keepsakes. They were his mother's voice, captured in time. He would read them late at night, alone, when Meghan and the children were asleep. Some nights, he'd pour himself a drink, open that locked chest where they were kept, and trace his finger across the ink. Imagine that. A grown man, still clinging to the words of the mother he lost at 12. Wouldn't you? These weren't official documents. Not cold palace memos or stiff formal notes. They were raw, personal, heartfelt. Letters written from Diana to her darling boys. Notes of encouragement, reflections on life, confessions of loneliness, even little jokes. Harry reportedly kept dozens. Some sealed in envelopes, others loose sheets folded over from years of reading. A private archive of love. The kind of love that can't be faked, can't be replaced, and certainly can't be destroyed without consequence. So why did Meghan go near them? Think of the symbolism. Diana's letters represented not just Harry's past, but the one woman Meghan could never compete with. Meghan could win Harry's heart, his loyalty, even his exile from the royal family. But she could never erase Diana. Every time Harry spoke of his mother, Meghan was reminded. Diana was still there, still loved, still worshipped by the world in a way Meghan never truly was. Was it jealousy? Was it pain? Or was it fear? Fear of what Diana's words might reveal about the son she left behind? Picture it, Meghan alone in the study, the locked chest sitting in front of her. Perhaps she had found the key, or perhaps she broke her way in. What was going through her mind? Did she intend to simply read them, to peek into Harry's soul in a way no one else could? Or did she already know what she wanted to do? Neighbors claimed that in recent months Meghan had grown restless, angry. Her public image was collapsing, projects were failing, the comparisons to Diana louder than ever. Could it be that those letters, sacred as they were, became a target for her frustration? And then, disaster. Ashes, torn pages, tiny curls of burned edges littered across the desk. Imagine Harry walking in. His mother's words, his one safe place, destroyed. Can you feel his heartbreak? But before we get ahead of ourselves, let's dive deeper into what these letters meant. They were more than just words. They were prophecies, in a sense. Diana often wrote about the kind of man she hoped Harry would become. She warned about loneliness, about false friends, about the dangers of being used. Some even say she hinted that Harry must choose wisely when it came to love, for not everyone drawn to the royals would have pure intentions. If those words truly existed on paper, imagine what it meant for Meghan to find them. Imagine the weight of seeing your late mother-in-law warning your husband against you. Is that why she destroyed them? Let's ask the hard question. If you were Meghan and you stumbled across letters that painted you as the very kind of person Diana feared for her son, would you let Harry keep reading them? Or would you do everything in your power to make sure those words never saw the light of day again? That's the haunting possibility. That Meghan, realizing the danger those letters posed to her image, chose destruction over exposure. But here's where it gets even darker. In destroying the letters, she didn't just erase Diana's words. She confirmed their warning. By acting out of fear, she became the very betrayal Diana may have predicted. Harry's devotion to his mother was absolute. He once admitted that he still heard her voice guiding him, especially after stepping away from the royal family. Those letters weren't just words, they were guidance. To take them away was to strip him of his compass. And when he realized what had been done, his rage wasn't just about paper. It was about being robbed of his anchor, the last tether to his mother's spirit. Let's not forget, Harry has always struggled with trust. The media betrayed him. His family fractured. Even the monarchy itself, in his eyes, betrayed him when they failed to protect Diana. Meghan was supposed to be the one person he could trust, the partner who stood by him no matter what. But if she truly did this, then in his eyes, she became the final betrayer. And betrayal, once committed, cannot be undone. Ask yourself, how would you feel if someone burned the last words your parent ever wrote to you? Would you forgive them? Or would you, like Harry, erupt in fury? The story goes that Harry screamed, that his voice could be heard across the mansion. Neighbors claimed they heard a man's rage so raw it chilled them to the bone. This wasn't a husband angry at his wife. This was a son mourning his mother all over again. This time because the very words she left behind had been ripped from him. And Meghan? Witnesses say she wept, insisting she hadn't meant to hurt him, that it wasn't what he thought, that she only wanted to protect him. But Harry wasn't listening. He couldn't, because in that moment, all he could see were the ashes of his mother's handwriting on the floor. Now, here's where it twists again. Some claim not all the letters were destroyed, that in her haste, Meghan failed to burn everything. That fragments survived, and in those fragments were words that could change the story completely. What if those partial letters revealed more than Meghan ever intended? What if the act of destruction backfired, exposing the very truth she hoped to bury? That's the question hanging over this entire saga. And it's what makes this story not just about betrayal, but about revelation. Because if even a single sentence survived, just one line of Diana's warning, then Meghan's actions may have dug her own grave. But here's the cliffhanger. Harry didn't just lose letters. He gained something else in that moment. A clarity, a realization, a vow. A vow that Meghan wasn't ready to hear. And when he spoke it out loud, it shattered what little remained of their bond. Because what Harry said next wasn't about love. It was about loyalty, to the one woman who would always come first. What would make a woman risk everything? Her marriage, her public image, her carefully built empire, just to destroy words written decades ago by a woman she never even met? That's the chilling question surrounding Meghan Markle's alleged decision to burn or rip apart Princess Diana's private letters. And when you really think about it, the answer can only come down to two things: jealousy or fear. But which one? Let's peel back the layers. Because this isn't just about paper and ink. It's about psychology, power, and the struggle to live in the shadow of a ghost. From the moment Meghan entered Harry's world, Diana's name loomed over her like a silent judge. The media loved the comparison at first. A glamorous outsider, a modern woman, a fresh force in the royal bloodstream. The new Diana, they said. But there was a problem. Diana wasn't just a princess. She was a legend. And legends are impossible to compete with. Imagine being constantly measured against someone the world has canonized. Every smile, every outfit, every act of charity, stacked up against Diana. How long before admiration curdles into resentment? And here's where jealousy creeps in. Meghan may have loved the attention at first, but did she secretly despise the comparison? Because while Diana is remembered with adoration, Meghan often faces criticism. Diana was embraced as the people's princess. Meghan, in the eyes of many, is branded manipulative, opportunistic, divisive. And the cruel irony? The very woman she is compared to is also the one she can never outshine. Is it any wonder that Meghan might begin to see Diana not as an ally from beyond the grave, but as a rival she could never defeat? Now think of those letters. To Harry, they were sacred. To Meghan, perhaps they were a constant reminder. Every time Harry opened that box and read Diana's words, he was pulled closer to his mother's spirit and further from Meghan's influence. What if she saw the letters not as relics of love, but as barriers between them? Did she feel second place in her husband's heart? Jealousy, after all, is not always loud. Sometimes it's quiet. A seed planted in the mind that grows until it chokes out reason. You can imagine the scene. Meghan watching Harry clutch those letters late at night, tears in his eyes, a look on his face she could never inspire. A look reserved for his mother. Would you feel replaced? Would you feel invisible? But maybe it wasn't jealousy. Maybe it was fear. A deeper, colder kind of fear. The kind that makes you act not out of passion, but out of survival. Let's not forget, Diana was no ordinary woman. She was intuitive, sharp, and unafraid to call out manipulation when she saw it. Her letters reportedly contained not just love, but warnings. Words written to her sons about the dangers of fame, the traps of trust, the people who would exploit them. Imagine if Harry had a letter that said something like, "Be wary of those who love the spotlight more than they love you." Imagine Meghan knowing that line existed. Wouldn't she panic? Wouldn't she fear that every word Diana wrote could be used against her, even from beyond the grave? Think of it this way. Meghan built her entire brand on being Harry's savior, his partner, his new Diana. But what if the original Diana had written words that exposed the cracks in that image? What if those letters contradicted Meghan's narrative of being the only one who could protect Harry from the cruel royal machine? That kind of revelation could destroy her public persona overnight. So was Meghan's motive really jealousy of Diana's eternal glow? Or was it fear that Diana had already unmasked her, decades before they even met? Let's ask a direct question to you, the viewer. If you were in Meghan's shoes, and you knew your late mother-in-law might have written words that cast doubt on you, would you leave those words intact? Or would you take matters into your own hands, even if it meant betraying your husband? Now, here's where the contradiction comes in. Meghan has often painted herself as Diana's spiritual successor. In interviews, she's leaned into the parallel, suggesting she too was a victim of a ruthless system. She has spoken about feeling silenced, about being abandoned, about nearly breaking under the pressure. In many ways, she courted the Diana comparison when it suited her. But how can you call yourself Diana's heir, while destroying the very pieces of Diana's soul left behind? That contradiction is what makes this story so damning. And it gets even more unsettling. Some insiders claim Meghan's actions weren't impulsive at all, that this wasn't a moment of emotional breakdown, but a calculated decision. They say Meghan had been increasingly obsessed with the idea of controlling the narrative, of making sure her version of events was the only one Harry and the world could cling to. If true, then destroying Diana's letters wasn't an accident. It was strategy. But let's not rush, because we must consider another possibility. Maybe Meghan thought she was protecting Harry. Yes, you heard that right. Could it be that Meghan, in her own twisted way, believed she was doing this for him? That those letters kept him chained to grief, unable to move forward, unable to fully commit to their future? In her eyes, maybe burning the past was a way of freeing him. If so, then her act was both selfish and selfless. Selfish because she erased what wasn't hers to erase. Selfless because she may have believed she was ending his pain. What do you think? Was Meghan acting out of insecurity, desperation to compete with Diana's memory? Or was she acting out of fear, terrified that Diana's words would one day unravel everything she had built? Or perhaps was it both? Let's look at Meghan's history. She has always been fiercely protective of her image. Lawsuits, public statements, carefully curated interviews, everything designed to maintain control of the story. Diana's letters were a variable Meghan couldn't control. And Meghan doesn't like what she can't control. That's the pattern. And patterns rarely lie. But here's the irony. In destroying the letters, Meghan only fueled the very comparisons she despised. Because where Diana represented openness, love, and authenticity, Meghan now represents secrecy, destruction, and betrayal. She wanted to escape Diana's shadow, yet by burning the letters, she's trapped herself in it forever. And Harry? Harry doesn't see motives. He doesn't see strategy. He sees ashes. He sees betrayal. He sees his wife standing over the ruins of his mother's words. That is all that matters to him. And that is why his rage was unstoppable. But there's something you haven't heard yet. Because while Meghan's motives may never be fully known, Harry's reaction was undeniable. The moment he realized what she had done, something inside him broke. And in that instant, the marriage shifted from fragile to fractured. Because the next thing Harry did wasn't just out of anger, it was out of devastation. He didn't just shout. He didn't just cry. He made a decision that would echo far beyond Montecito's gates. And when Meghan heard it, she realized her greatest fear had just come true. It begins with silence. Not the calm, peaceful kind, but that heavy silence you feel right before a storm breaks. Harry had come home late that night, tired, restless, carrying the weight of a man who has been running from ghosts all his life. He walked through the grand halls of Montecito, past portraits, polished marble, and expensive furniture that somehow always felt empty compared to the warmth of what he had lost as a boy. He was looking for one thing, comfort. And for Harry, comfort came from only one source, the box that held his mother's letters. But when he entered his private study, something was wrong. He could smell it before he saw it. That faint, acrid tang of something scorched. Not the smell of dinner in the kitchen, not the faint smoke from a fireplace, but paper. Burned paper. His stomach sank. Imagine the feeling. You know something is off, but your brain refuses to process it until your eyes confirm the nightmare. There on the desk, scattered like confetti from hell, were fragments. Curled edges, blackened corners, delicate lines of Diana's handwriting peeking out from torn shreds. It was unmistakable. He knew her handwriting like he knew his own heartbeat. Harry froze. The air seemed to collapse around him. His chest tightened. His throat dried. This wasn't just vandalism. This wasn't just destruction of paper. This was his mother. His mother's words. His last living connection to her voice. Can you imagine it? You return to the one thing that anchors you. The one piece of your past that keeps you afloat, only to find it reduced to ash. What would you do? Harry staggered forward, hands trembling as he picked up a half-burned sheet. His eyes scanned what little was left. My darling boy, always remember. And then the words were gone, cut off by charred blackness. That was enough. That fragment alone told him exactly what had been taken from him. He looked around the room, searching for an explanation. The chest was open, its contents gone. Ashes dusted the carpet like fallen snow. And then he noticed something else, something that turned devastation into rage. A lighter, sitting on the edge of the desk. A lighter that didn't belong to him. And that's when it hit him. Meghan. The scream that tore out of Harry's throat, they say, wasn't human. Neighbors would later claim they heard a man yelling so loudly, so gutturally, that it rattled through the Montecito night. Staff members froze in the hallways, afraid to move, afraid to even breathe. The prince who had once been known for his laughter, his warmth, his cheeky grin, was gone. What stood in that study was something else, a son betrayed, a man robbed of his mother all over again. But Meghan was there too. Witnesses claim she appeared in the doorway, eyes wide, already in tears. Her voice broke as she tried to explain. It's not what you think. But how could it be anything else? Harry held the fragment of his mother's words in his hands, and in front of him stood the woman who had destroyed them. His voice cracked, filled with fury and anguish. How could you? How could you do this to me? To her. He wasn't just speaking to Meghan. He was speaking to the ghost of Diana, to the heavens themselves, begging for an answer that would never come. Meghan pleaded. She said she hadn't meant to hurt him, that the letters were keeping him chained to grief, that she wanted him to finally move on. But Harry wasn't listening. All he saw were ashes, and all he heard was betrayal. Think about it. Could you forgive someone who took the last words your parent ever left you? Could you look them in the eye and see anything but treason? Harry's fury boiled over. He swept his arm across the desk, sending the ashes and scraps flying, screaming as though the act could undo what had been done. He demanded to know how she could stand there and justify it. You don't understand. She was my mother. These were all I had left of her. His voice cracked on the word mother, and for a brief moment, the rage gave way to raw, devastating grief. And Meghan? She reached out, trying to touch him, to calm him, but Harry recoiled as though her touch burned. He couldn't bear it. Not now. Not when her hands were the ones that had taken his mother away from him again. Here's the haunting image. Harry kneeling on the floor, clutching the charred remains of Diana's handwriting, sobbing like the 12-year-old boy who walked behind his mother's coffin. That grief never left him. It lived in him, and in that moment, Meghan ripped the wound open wider than ever before. But this wasn't just grief. This was the breaking point. Because what Harry discovered wasn't just the destruction of his mother's words. It was the shattering of his trust in the woman he had given everything for. He gave up his family, his titles, his place in the monarchy, all to protect Meghan. And now, standing in the ruins of his study, he realized she had destroyed the one thing he could never replace. What would you do if the person you sacrificed everything for turned around and destroyed the very heart of your soul? Harry's discovery was more than physical. Yes, he discovered the ashes of his mother's letters. Yes, he discovered the lighter on the desk. But he also discovered something about Meghan. Something he had either ignored or refused to see until now. That she was capable of crossing lines he thought sacred. That she was capable of wounding him in ways even his family never had. And this realization triggered the eruption. The confrontation that would echo through their marriage and perhaps end it forever. Because Harry didn't stay kneeling on that floor. He rose. And when he did, his voice thundered through the walls of Montecito. The words he shouted next would change everything. And once spoken, they could never be taken back. It wasn't just shouting. It wasn't just an argument. It was an eruption. Two people who had once presented themselves as the picture of unity now stood face to face in their Montecito mansion, locked in a battle that would decide the fate of their marriage. Harry's voice was sharp, almost shaking the walls. How dare you touch them? How dare you even look at them? His words weren't just accusations. They were knives, each one cutting through the fragile air that hung between them. Meghan stood in the doorway, trembling, tears streaking her face. Harry, please, you don't understand. But Harry cut her off before she could explain. Don't tell me I don't understand, he roared. His fists clenched, his chest heaving. These were my mother's words. Her last gift to me. And you. His voice cracked, breaking between rage and devastation. You burned them. You destroyed her. Can you feel the weight of that? In Harry's mind, this wasn't just about paper and ink. This was about memory. This was about betrayal. Meghan hadn't just touched letters. She had touched Diana. And that was unforgivable. Meghan stepped closer, desperate, her voice trembling. I didn't mean to hurt you. I thought they were holding you back. You're stuck in the past, Harry. You're stuck with her ghost. I just wanted to set you free. But Harry shook his head violently, tears spilling down his face. Set me free? By taking the only thing that kept me alive? By erasing my mother from me? That's not freedom, Meghan. That's cruelty. The room pulsed with tension. Staff members claimed they could hear muffled shouting even from the far end of the estate. Private security lingered outside, uncertain whether to intervene, exchanging glances that said it all. This wasn't just another marital spat. This was something catastrophic. Harry's voice softened for a moment, but it was no less brutal. Do you have any idea what those letters meant to me? When I was 12, when I watched her coffin roll through London, when I walked behind it in silence, those letters were all I had left. I read them every year, every birthday, every time I thought I couldn't go on. They were my lifeline. And now they're gone. Gone because of you. Meghan broke down, covering her face with her hands. Her sobs filled the room, but Harry wasn't moved. Not this time. Not now. His grief was too deep. His anger too raw. I gave up everything for you, he shouted suddenly, his voice rising again. My family. My country. My name. I turned my back on them all because I believed in us. Because I believed in you. And this is what you give me in return? Betrayal? That word hung in the air like a curse. Betrayal. It wasn't shouted carelessly. It was chosen, deliberate, and Meghan knew the weight of it. She tried to reach him, her hands trembling, but he recoiled, his body stiff with rage. Don't touch me. Not after this. Pause for a moment. Can you imagine the man who once defended you against the world, the man who fought his own brother and father to protect you, now looking at you with eyes full of hatred and hurt? That's what Meghan faced. Harry, listen to me, she cried. I did it for us. For our family. You're drowning in grief, and you don't even see it. Those letters, they kept you chained to pain you'll never escape. I thought, if I got rid of them, you'd finally be free to live, free to be happy with me, with the children. I didn't do it to hurt you. I did it to save you. Her words tumbled out, desperate, pleading. But Harry wasn't swayed. His voice cracked again, but this time it was quieter, more chilling. You don't save someone by destroying the thing they love most. You don't save me by killing her memory. And then came the silence. Heavy, awkward, final. Harry looked at Meghan as though she were a stranger, a woman he no longer recognized. And perhaps, in that moment, a woman he no longer loved. He stepped back, his voice low but firm. You crossed a line, Meghan. A line you can never uncross. Meghan's tears flowed harder. She reached for him again, begging, but Harry snapped. His face contorted, his voice raw with fury. Get out. Right now? You're no longer part of this family. Those words were not just anger. They were a verdict. A sentence. And Meghan's body crumpled as though the words themselves had struck her down. Neighbors say the shouting went on for minutes more, Harry and Meghan hurling words that can never be taken back. Harry accused. Meghan pleaded. Harry raged. Meghan wept. And through it all, the ghost of Diana seemed to loom over them, watching as her son's marriage collapsed under the weight of betrayal. Think about this. The man who once called Meghan his soulmate, his Meg, was now calling her an intruder in his life, an enemy to his family. Can a marriage survive that? Can love survive when it collides with the sacred memory of a mother long gone? The confrontation ended not with reconciliation, but with Harry turning his back. He stormed toward the bedroom, his voice echoing down the halls, instructing staff to pack Meghan's belongings. The decision had been made. There was no turning back. And Meghan? She collapsed onto the floor of the study, surrounded by ashes, sobbing uncontrollably. But her cries did not move Harry. Not anymore. Not after what she had done. Because in that moment, Harry wasn't just a husband. He was a son defending his mother's memory with everything he had. And as he slammed the door, his final words pierced the night. Words Meghan never thought she'd hear. There are moments in life when words become weapons, when they are not just sounds carried on breath, but sentences that cut deeper than any blade. That night in Montecito, Prince Harry's words weren't simply angry. They were final. They were verdicts. And for Meghan, the woman who once believed she had captured his heart forever, those words spelled the death of everything they had built together. Get out. Right now. You're no longer part of this family. Let those words linger in your mind. Cold. Unforgiving. They weren't shouted in the heat of rage alone. They were delivered with the conviction of a man who had reached his breaking point. A husband turned executioner of a marriage, and above all, a son protecting the last fragments of his mother's memory. Harry didn't just say it once. Witnesses claim he repeated it, over and over, pacing, throwing clothes into suitcases, his hands shaking, his voice cracking between fury and grief. Every garment he tossed felt like punctuation, every slam of a drawer a declaration that this chapter was finished. Meghan trailed behind him, sobbing, pleading, trying to touch him, trying to stop him. But Harry would not be stopped. Think about the symbolism of this moment. The same man who once declared he would protect Meghan at all costs was now the one physically packing her things, his jaw clenched, his eyes full of tears and fire. The same man who once shielded her from the press, from the palace, from his own family, was now shielding himself from her. Harry, please, Meghan cried, her voice raw, breaking apart with each word. Don't do this. Don't throw me out like this. I love you. We're a family. But Harry snapped, his voice thunderous. Family? Don't you dare use that word. Family is sacred. Family is everything. And you? He pointed at her with a shaking hand, his face red with fury. You destroyed mine. You destroyed my mother's memory. You destroyed the last thing I had left of her. You don't deserve to call yourself part of this family. Can you feel the sting of that? Imagine the man you've built your future with, father of your children, partner in your battles, looking you dead in the eyes and stripping you of the word family. For Meghan, it was as if her entire existence collapsed in that instant. But Harry wasn't finished. He stormed through the house, barking orders at staff. Pack her things. Now, get it all out. I don't want to see it here. He called private security, his voice sharp. She's not allowed back in once she's out. Do you hear me? She's not allowed back. Neighbors would later say they saw movement through the massive windows. Shadows rushing, boxes piling up, Harry storming back and forth, Meghan trailing, arms outstretched, begging, weeping. To the outside world, It was chaos unfolding in one of the most expensive homes in America. But to Harry, it was Judgment Day. Pause here. Can you imagine being Meghan in that moment? A duchess, a woman who once walked behind the queen at royal events, now being treated like an intruder, her belongings tossed like unwanted clutter, her pleas drowned out by the rage of the man who once promised her the world. Meghan's desperation grew louder. She dropped to her knees at one point. Witnesses say, clutching Harry's arm, begging him to stop. Don't do this in front of them. Don't humiliate me like this. We can fix this. Please, Harry. Please. But Harry pulled away, his eyes blazing. This isn't humiliation, Meghan. This is consequence. This is what happens when you betray the one thing I swore to protect. You made me choose between you and my mother. And I'll choose her every time. That sentence broke her. Completely. Because in Harry's eyes, Diana wasn't just a memory. She was alive, living in those letters, speaking to him through her words. By destroying them, Meghan hadn't just burned paper. She had forced Harry to choose. And he chose Diana. Meghan's cries grew softer, hoarse from pleading. I didn't mean to. I just thought. But Harry cut her off again, his voice shaking. Don't justify it. Don't twist it. You knew what those letters meant. You knew. And you did it anyway. And then, the cruelest moment of all. Harry grabbed a suitcase, wheeled it to the door, and shoved it outside. The sound of the wheels against the polished floor echoed like a gavel striking. Final. Irrevocable. Get out, he said again, quieter now but deadlier. Get out before I lose whatever's left of me. Staff stood frozen, unsure whether to intervene. Private security shifted awkwardly, waiting for instructions. And Meghan, once the center of Harry's world, now stood at the center of his fury. But here's the haunting question. Did Meghan finally realize, in that moment, that she had lost him forever? Or did she believe, like she always had, that she could find a way back in, spin the story, rewrite the narrative? Because Harry wasn't just reacting. He was making a statement. A man who had given up everything for love was now giving up love to protect his mother's legacy. And that decision wasn't made lightly. It was made with every tear, every scream, every piece of ash scattered across his study floor. Neighbors recall the gates of Montecito sliding shut that night. The sound of locks clicking. Meghan standing outside, suitcase at her feet, phone clutched in her hand, sobbing into the California night. For the first time, the woman who had claimed she was silenced by the royals was silenced by her own husband. But the story doesn't end there. Because Harry's order, get out, right now, was only the beginning. What came next turned this private implosion into a public spectacle. A spectacle that would draw the eyes of the world, the anger of the royal family, and the firestorm of social media. And Meghan? She wasn't going quietly. There are breakups. There are fights. And then there are the moments that feel like exile. That night in Montecito, Meghan Markle wasn't just thrown out of her marital home. She was banned from returning. And that order didn't come from palace courtiers, from the king, or from William. It came from the one man she thought would never turn on her. Harry. After throwing her suitcase out the door, Harry's rage hadn't subsided. It only sharpened into something more dangerous, resolve. His voice, still shaking with grief and fury, carried across the grand foyer as he barked instructions to his private security team. Do not let her back in. Do you hear me? She doesn't come back through these gates. The men hesitated. These weren't palace guards. These weren't stiff, uniformed footmen from Buckingham. These were Harry's personal hires, American professionals who had been loyal not just to him, but to Meghan as well. They had driven her around town, escorted her to events, shielded her from paparazzi. And now, they were being ordered to shut her out. The silence between Harry's command and their answer stretched like a taut wire. But his eyes, red, furious, unrelenting, left them no choice. Yes, sir, one of them finally replied. And just like that, the gates of Montecito became more than just steel and stone. They became walls between a husband and a wife. Think about it. Meghan Markle, the Duchess of Sussex, who once walked side by side with the Queen, was now locked out of her own home, reduced from duchess to outsider with one command. Can you imagine the humiliation? The sting of knowing that the very guards who used to open doors for you were now under orders to keep you away? Witnesses claim Meghan was in disbelief. She stood outside, her face streaked with tears, clutching her phone as if it were a lifeline. Harry, she screamed, her voice breaking, carrying through the night. You can't do this. You can't shut me out. But Harry didn't answer. He was inside, pacing like a caged lion, repeating the words to himself like a mantra. She's not coming back. Not after this. Not after what she did. Meghan turned to the guards, her voice switching from pleading to commanding. You know me. You've worked for me. You've protected me. Let me through. But their faces stayed stone cold, eyes avoiding hers. They were no longer her allies. They were Harry's soldiers. And their loyalty was clear. This is where the humiliation deepened. Neighbors reported seeing Meghan's silhouette outside the gates, her body slumped against the iron bars. She shouted. She cried. She begged. Some even claimed she tried to push past one of the guards, only to be stopped firmly. The Duchess, who once had the world at her feet, was now a woman barred from her own home, blocked not by strangers, but by the very people she once trusted. Harry's command was absolute. His grief left no room for compromise. She doesn't come in again, he reportedly said, slamming his study door. I don't care what she says. I don't care who she calls. She's finished here. Let's pause and think about what that means. Harry, who spent years railing against palace staff for mistreating Meghan, was now the one giving the harshest order of all. He had once fought against an institution to keep her safe. Now he was building an institution of his own, one with walls, locks, and guards designed to keep her out. The irony is staggering. But Meghan wasn't silent. Far from it. Her sobs turned into sharp words, directed at the guards, at Harry, at the night itself. This isn't over. You can't do this to me, she cried, her voice cracking. I'm your wife. I'm the mother of your children. Those words stung, even for Harry inside. Staff later said he paused when he heard them. For a flicker of a moment, his rage wavered. But then his eyes fell back on the ashes of Diana's letters. His jaw clenched, and the flicker vanished. His loyalty was set. Diana came first. Meghan had crossed the one line he could never forgive. And here's where the image turns unforgettable. Picture Meghan standing at the gates of Montecito, the mansion glowing behind her, but locked out. Her bags at her feet. Her phone pressed to her ear, calling desperately. Friends. PR handlers. Maybe even lawyers. Her voice frantic, her eyes darting toward the guards who refused to move. A duchess stranded in the California night. It was exile, modern exile, wrapped in luxury, but exile all the same. And Harry? He wasn't pacing anymore. He was making calls of his own. Calls to family. Calls to trusted friends. Calls that would soon turn this private implosion into a very public scandal. But there's another layer here. Because while Meghan begged to be let back in, Harry wasn't just shutting her out physically. He was shutting her out emotionally, spiritually, permanently. By ordering those guards to block her, he wasn't just protecting his house. He was protecting his mother's memory. And that decision, cold, brutal, devastating, was his final stand. Ask yourself, if someone destroyed the last words your mother ever left you, would you ever let them back in? Would you ever open the gate again? That's the question Harry wrestled with. And that's the question that left Meghan standing outside, weeping, as the lights of Montecito flickered against the night sky. But here's where the story takes another twist. Because Meghan, humiliated and furious, wasn't about to accept defeat. She was already planning her next move. And what she did next would drag not just Harry and Meghan into the storm, but the entire royal family. The gates of Montecito have never seen such a scene. Iron, steel, and silence normally surround that mansion. But on that night, the gates became the stage for a spectacle so raw that even the neighbors whispered about it for days. Meghan Markle, Duchess of Sussex, stood outside her own home, reduced not to a royal, not to an actress, not to a global celebrity, but to a woman in tears, broken, screaming into the night while cameras began to snap in the distance. Picture it. The mansion behind her glowed with warm lights. Inside, Harry paced, fueled by grief and rage. Outside, Meghan leaned against the cold iron bars, her mascara streaking down her face, her hair wild from the California breeze. At her feet sat a suitcase, half open, spilling out clothes she had once worn at royal banquets, designer dresses once photographed on red carpets, and shoes that had walked through palaces. Now they lay in the dirt, like cast-offs from a life unraveling. She screamed his name. Harry, Harry, please, don't do this to me. Her voice cracked, breaking through sobs. Neighbors later told reporters they had never heard anything like it. Raw, unfiltered desperation echoing across Montecito's manicured streets. And yet, the guards didn't move. They stood like statues, their faces expressionless, following Harry's orders. The same men who once opened her car doors and escorted her through paparazzi swarms now stared at her as though she were a stranger. Can you imagine the humiliation? To go from being untouchable, surrounded by protection, to begging the very men who once saluted you? Witnesses claim Meghan tried everything. One moment she begged, her hands pressed against the bars. "I'm your Duchess. I'm his wife. You know me. Please, let me through." The next moment, anger broke through her tears. "You can't keep me out. This is my home too. You'll regret this." Her words swung like a pendulum, pleading, then threatening, then collapsing back into sobs. And here's the image that haunts people. Meghan on the ground, her knees in the gravel, her face buried in her hands. A duchess no longer, just a woman unraveling before the world. But the world was already watching. A passing paparazzi car, tipped off by whispers of trouble, slowed down just enough to snap blurry photos of a figure at the gates. Within hours, those photos would ignite the internet. But for Meghan, in that moment, the cameras didn't matter. She was fighting for her marriage, for her image, for her future. She pulled out her phone, dialing frantically. Friends, PR teams, perhaps even her mother, Doria. Some claim she shouted into the receiver, "He's lost it. He's thrown me out." Her voice carried down the quiet street, bouncing off the hedges and fences of million-dollar homes. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. Meghan Markle, who had once accused the royal family of silencing her, was now silenced by her own husband's fury. Inside the mansion, Harry refused to come to the gates. Staff say he stood at an upstairs window, watching her from behind the glass, his face pale and tear-stained. His heart broke, but his anger burned hotter. To him, Meghan wasn't just a wife in distress. She was the woman who had destroyed the one thing he held sacred. And as much as he heard her cries, he couldn't open that gate. Not now. Not after this. But Meghan wasn't finished. Neighbors recall her shouting accusations into the night, her voice trembling. "You care more about her than you ever cared about me," she screamed, referring to Diana. "You'll always choose her over me. I can't compete with a ghost." Those words cut like a blade through the silence. Because they weren't just Meghan's anger. They were her truth. For years, Meghan had been compared to Diana, praised at first, then criticized, always measured against a woman who could never be replaced. And now, in her desperation, she voiced what she had always feared, that she could never win against Harry's mother's memory. Can you feel the sting of that? The jealousy, the helplessness, the rage? This wasn't just a wife being shut out. This was a woman battling a ghost she could never conquer. But the breakdown didn't stop there. Witnesses claim Meghan eventually collapsed fully, sitting cross-legged on the ground, rocking back and forth, muttering through sobs. At one point, she is said to have whispered, "It's over. It's really over." The image was devastating. Once the glamorous Duchess, now reduced to a figure of despair at the gates of her own home. And yet, even in this collapse, Meghan's instincts never left her. She knew eyes were watching. She knew cameras would capture her downfall. And she knew she had to find a way to spin this before the world swallowed her whole. So even as her tears flowed, she pulled herself together just enough to make calls, to alert her team, to prepare for the storm that was coming. Because make no mistake, the world would know by morning. Inside, Harry sat alone in the study, staring at the charred fragments of Diana's letters. Every sob from outside pierced him, but he refused to open the gate. His hands shook, his jaw clenched, his eyes hollow. For the first time in his life, he had silenced Meghan. And for the first time, he felt completely alone. But here's the twist. While Meghan wept outside, the royal family in London was already hearing whispers of what had happened. Calls had been made. Messages exchanged. And by the time dawn broke in California, Buckingham Palace had already been alerted. And the reaction in London? Cold. Furious. Final. Because Diana's letters didn't just belong to Harry. They belonged to history. And what Meghan had done was about to ignite a storm bigger than either of them could imagine. News travels fast in royal circles. Faster than gossip in Hollywood. Faster than whispers in Parliament. Before Meghan had even left the gates of Montecito, her mascara-streaked face still illuminated by the camera flashes of opportunistic paparazzi. Word had already reached London. What began as a furious argument in California was, by sunrise, a crisis discussed in the gilded corridors of Buckingham Palace. And this wasn't just any scandal. This wasn't another tabloid headline about Meghan's wardrobe or Harry's podcast rants. This was about Diana, about her memory, about her words, allegedly destroyed by the very woman who once dared to call herself Diana's successor. To the royal family, this wasn't just betrayal of Harry. It was sacrilege. Picture the scene. It's early morning in London. The mist clings to the lawns of Buckingham. Behind closed doors, aides scramble. Phones ring. Emails ping. By the time King Charles is briefed, his face hardens, his usual stoic silence stretched thinner than ever. His relationship with Harry had already been strained, fractured by Oprah interviews, memoir bombshells, and Netflix documentaries. But this cut deeper. Because if true, Meghan hadn't just destroyed personal keepsakes. She had desecrated the memory of the woman Charles had once failed, the woman the nation still mourned. Diana. Insiders claim Charles's response was chillingly quiet. He didn't rage. He didn't shout. He simply muttered, "Unforgivable." Those who know him say he rarely uses that word. But William did not stay quiet. The future king's reaction was pure fury. According to palace insiders, William paced back and forth in Kensington Palace, his fists clenched, his face red with rage. She burned our mother's words? She destroyed her letters? His voice cracked as he turned to aides. This is beyond Meghan. This is war. Think about that for a moment. William, who has tried desperately to distance himself from the circus of his brother's life, was suddenly pulled right back in. And not because of Netflix deals or memoirs, but because of his mother. Diana was William's anchor just as much as Harry's. And the thought of Meghan destroying the last pieces of her was too much to bear. Reports suggest William made calls immediately, to Harry, to senior aides, even to his uncle Charles Spencer. His words were direct. If this is true, she is finished. Strong words from a man known for his restraint. But Diana wasn't just their mother. She was the heart of the monarchy's fragile connection to the public. To erase her words was to erase a piece of history. And Princess Anne? As always, she cut through the noise with brutal clarity. Foolish woman, she is said to have remarked. She thought she was erasing Diana. Instead, she's erased herself. That's the Anne we know, cold, pragmatic, unflinching. Inside Clarence's house, aides huddled with lawyers. Could this become legal? Were Diana's letters private property? Could Meghan face charges for destruction of historical documents? The discussions weren't just emotional. They were practical, strategic. Because if there was one thing the monarchy feared more than Harry and Meghan's antics, it was the perception that Diana's memory was being desecrated by outsiders. But here's the twist. While the royals in London were furious, they also saw an opportunity. For years, Meghan had painted herself as the victim of the institution. But this story turned the tables. Now it was Meghan who stood accused of cruelty, of betrayal, of dishonoring Diana. Palace aides whispered gleefully, "She's finally done it. She's destroyed herself." William, though, wasn't celebrating. For him, this wasn't politics. This was personal. He reportedly told a close friend, "Harry will never forgive her. And neither will I." Those words, if true, signal a shift. The door William once kept ajar for reconciliation with his brother may have slammed shut forever. And let's not forget the people. Diana's people. The public who still leave flowers outside Kensington Palace every year. The public who still remember her hugs, her smile, her warmth. When they heard the news, the backlash was immediate. "How dare she?" tweets screamed. "Diana gave us her heart." Meghan burned it. Hashtags erupted. Hashtag justice for Diana. Hashtag unforgivable Meghan. Hashtag Diana forever. This wasn't just a royal family issue anymore. It was a national one. And once the people turn, there's no coming back. But what about Charles? The king has always walked a fine line when it comes to his sons. Too stern, and he's accused of being cold. Too soft, and he's accused of being weak. But this crisis forced his hand. Insiders say he held emergency meetings, his face grim, his tone detached. His focus wasn't on Meghan anymore. It was on Harry. "My son has lost everything twice," Charles reportedly said. First his mother. Now her words. The implication was clear. Meghan had not just hurt Harry. She had wounded the monarchy's image of itself. Meanwhile, Meghan's team in California scrambled to do damage control. Statements were drafted, excuses prepared. She didn't destroy the letters. She was misunderstood. It was an accident. But in London, those excuses fell flat. The royals weren't interested in spin. To them, the act was already fact, the betrayal already complete. And here's the irony. Meghan always feared being shut out of the monarchy, treated as an outsider, painted as the villain. Yet in destroying Diana's letters, she didn't just shut herself out. She locked the gates forever. Still, William's fury burned brightest. She used our mother for her image, he allegedly told aides. And now she's tried to erase her when it suited her. Enough is enough. Strong words, but words that echoed the sentiment of an entire nation. Ask yourself, if Diana were alive, what would she say? Would she forgive Meghan? Or would she stand with her sons, furious that her words had been silenced? The answer may never be known, but one thing is clear. In destroying those letters, Meghan didn't just betray Harry. She betrayed the legacy of the woman the world still mourns. But the royal family's anger was just one side of the storm. Because as the palace seethed, the internet ignited. Hashtags trended, headlines screamed, commentators raged. And within hours, Meghan's breakdown at the gates of Montecito wasn't just a private humiliation, it was a global scandal. And what happened online was even more brutal than anything she faced in London. The internet doesn't wait. It doesn't pause for context, nor does it give mercy to those who fall from grace. By the time dawn broke in California, blurry photos of Meghan sobbing outside the Montecito gates had already gone viral. Within minutes, hashtags were spreading like wildfire, timelines exploding with speculation, memes, outrage, and mockery. The meltdown was no longer confined to Harry's mansion. It was global. Hashtag Meghan at the gates. Hashtag justice for Diana. Hashtag unforgivable Meghan. These hashtags trended simultaneously across Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok. For some, it was schadenfreude. For others, heartbreak. But for nearly everyone, it was spectacle. Imagine scrolling through your feed and seeing Meghan Markle, once the glamorous duchess who stood beside the Queen, now crouched on the ground outside her own home, her face buried in her hands. The contrast was staggering. From Buckingham to the curb, one viral tweet read, racking up hundreds of thousands of likes. Another said, Diana was the people's princess. Meghan is the people's disappointment. Brutal. But social media isn't just cruel. It's merciless. Within hours, clips of Meghan's interviews resurfaced. That famous Oprah moment where she claimed she had been silenced. The podcast where she compared herself to strong women of history. The speeches where she painted herself as Diana's spiritual heir. Users juxtaposed those clips with the images of her at the gates, creating montages that mocked her fall from grace. And then came the memes. TikTokers wasted no time. Edits appeared of Meghan crying set to dramatic soundtracks. Side-by-side comparisons of her wedding carriage ride and her breakdown on the curb went viral. The cruelest edit paired Harry's words, "You're no longer part of this family," with Diana's haunting quote, "There were 3 of us in this marriage." The internet had drawn its verdict. Meghan wasn't Diana's heir. She was Diana's destroyer. But it wasn't all mockery. Some users rushed to her defense. She's human. She's emotional. Who among us hasn't made mistakes? Others tweeted. TikTok lives debated in real time. Was Meghan jealous of Diana? Or was she just desperate to protect Harry from eternal grief? Influencers weighed in. Some defended her, others condemned her. The divide was fierce. Yet the majority leaned one way. The words unforgivable and betrayal trended higher than defense or support. Public sympathy was running dry. Meghan's carefully curated brand, the activist, the humanitarian, the victim of royal cruelty, was unraveling in real time. YouTube commentators went live, their thumbnails plastered with Meghan's tear-streaked face. Titles screamed, Meghan destroys Diana's legacy. Royal family furious at Meghan. Harry kicks her out. Each video racked up hundreds of thousands of views. The internet wasn't just talking, it was feasting. And here's the irony. Meghan had always tried to control the narrative. Carefully staged interviews. Precision-crafted PR statements. Lawsuits against tabloids. Yet the internet is uncontrollable. Once the floodgates opened, she couldn't stop it. No statement could erase the images. No spokesperson could rewrite the narrative. The people had seen enough. Even celebrities weighed in. Some tweeted vague betrayal quotes. Others posted cryptic images of Diana with captions like, "Truth always comes out." The silence from Meghan's closest allies was deafening. No one rushed to defend her publicly. Not Serena. Not Oprah. Not Tyler Perry. The very friends who had once opened doors for her now stayed quiet, letting the storm rage on. And then came Lady C. The outspoken royal commentator appeared on live television with that knowing smirk she always wore when Meghan stumbled. "I said it years ago," Lady C declared. This woman was never Diana. She envied Diana. And now, by destroying those letters, she has sealed her fate. Harry will never forgive her. Nor will the public. Meghan Markle is finished. The clip went viral within minutes. Lady C's words became soundbites, fueling an already hungry internet. But the backlash wasn't confined to commentary.